I know one time you had to stay with, or I say had to, you got the privilege of staying with Mohamed El Shabaghi himself. What's it like? Because you've gone from looking up to players like this. Obviously Mohamed El Shabaghi, he's one of the biggest legends of the sport that there are. With his achievements and all that, and suddenly you're sharing a room with him.
Yeah.
What's that like?
As we walk up to the restaurant, there's about 200 metres up there, and then these you probably hear 10 dogs started barking, and they were literally, it was getting louder and louder as they're walking up, and then we thought they're all behind this big gate thing, and again we didn't know whether these are wild or tame dogs, so they started running towards us, and then literally me paying to turn around. I started running. Perry and Tori carried on walking because they thought that'd be the best thing. I ran down to this car that I saw.
What you're telling me is you ran from these dogs and you left Perry and Tori for dead.
Yeah, basically, yeah.
Hi guys, welcome back to the Josh Attwell Sports YouTube channel, where I am joined here again by Curtis Malik, the current world number 45 squash player, and he is here to take a look behind the curtain of what professional players get up to between tournaments or on their travels to tournaments. Now, I'm sure a lot of you watch the tournaments, you watch the finals or whatever matches you watch, and you're only really focused on what they're doing on the court at that moment. And you don't think too much about, well, how did they get to the tournament? What have they done? Where are they staying? Who are they staying with? Who are they interacting with? Or any of the exciting things that can go on outside of the court. So today that's what we're going to be looking at. We're going to be going through some funny and exciting stories, some wild stories, I would say, of different adventures that Curtis has been on over the last few years on the tour. So we're just going to start off with the travel side of things specifically. Now, I'll just let Curtis talk for a lot of this. I won't interrupt. I'll try not to, although some of the moments I might need to. But there was one in particular where I got a message from Curtis after this, and I thought as soon as he told me this story, it had to go on a podcast at some point. This was before I had started the channel. So I'm just going to let him talk about it. And that is one when he was playing a tournament in Nigeria, or specifically when he was on his way to this tournament in Nigeria. So I'll let you go through it.
So me, Perry and Tori all entered a 12k event in Nigeria back in May. I just travelled back from Chicago, was at home for less than a day, and then me, Perry and Tori travelled from Heathrow to Nigeria. So we had a stopover in Istanbul, and it was a 16-hour stop. So we decided to book a hotel just outside the airport in Istanbul for the night. So we'd fly from Heathrow to Istanbul, stay the night, and then fly the next morning from Istanbul to Nigeria. That was the plan. So we managed to make Istanbul quite a good time. We got there in the evening around 7 p.m. and then we wanted to go and check on our Airbnb. So we got a taxi, and this taxi drove us into what literally felt like the middle of nowhere. We had no phone internet or anything because our 4G didn't cover that plan. And we got to this place, and we were driving along, and there were wild dogs everywhere, waiting on the roads. And there were these houses with these big black gates on that we couldn't get in unless we had some sort of access code. And it's getting pretty late at night. This taxi guy doesn't speak a word of English. He doesn't know where we're meant to be staying. I don't know the exact address of where we're staying, and I can't call the guy because I don't have any internet or don't have his number. And then the taxi guy says, I'm just going to have to drop you off here. And I was like, well, it's the middle of nowhere, the dead-end streets. There's these dogs roaming around looking pretty scary with no collars on. And the taxi guy said, yeah, you've got to be careful because you don't know which dogs are wild and which dogs are actually tame and fine. So we were actually really getting scared and pooing ourselves. And in the end, we managed to find the right place. And there was a really big dog outside of it. And luckily, that dog was actually the dog of the owner. We go in, we get inside the house, and we bed down for the night. And then about 2 a.m. in the morning, we hear someone we thought it was just us in the house sleeping. And at 2 a.m, someone else comes in and starts walking around the house. And we're like, who the hell is this? It turns out to be this American guy this American guy staying there as well, and he's talking to his parents, doesn't have a clue we're in the house. And then I think my sister gets up and goes to the toilet, and she can hear him talking, and he was like, it kind of made him jump that we were also there. So then we had to tell him to be quiet a bit because we were trying to sleep before the next fight the next day. And then, there's another bit to the story before that. That evening we went to go and get some food because we were starving. We'd been travelling all day. We landed in Istanbul, obviously got to the house, and after the house we went to go out and get some food. We got a taxi from the house to this restaurant, and as we were walking up to he dropped us at the bottom of the road. As we were walking up to the restaurant, there's about 200 metres up there, and then these you probably hear 10 dogs started barking, and they were literally, it was getting louder and louder as they were walking up, and then we thought they were all behind this big gate thing, and again we didn't know whether these are wild or tame dogs, so they started running towards us, and then literally me, Perry and Tori turned around. I started running. Perry and Tori carried on walking because I thought that'd be the best thing. I ran down to this car that I saw, and there was a guy on his phone chatting to his girlfriend at the middle of the night, and I had to knock on his window saying, "Oh, quick! There's these dogs chasing us. Can you help us?" And he's like, "Oh no, fine. They're dogs of the restaurant owners." So luckily he walked us up, took the dogs away, and then we managed to go and eat. So that's just the Istanbul part.
So what you're telling me is you ran from these dogs and you left Perry and Tori for dead.
Yeah, basically, yeah. My claim is that I was actually going to get the help.
Yeah, okay, yeah.
Because I got to the car before the dogs got near us, and the guy actually stopped the dogs from coming towards us.
Because didn't you have to go out to get some food in the morning as well?
Oh God, yeah. I forgot about that. Yeah. Because in the morning, me and Perry, we didn't have any breakfast. There's no food at the Airbnb, so we went to go and get some fruit and bread and stuff. We had to walk to this shop. It was about a 10-minute walk, 15-minute walk. Every single house we walked past, there was this big, scary-looking dog outside of each house, sitting there like a guard dog. And we made sure we walked on the opposite side of the road made no eye contact with the dogs, and just tried to walk as quickly as possible to the shop and make sure we got back. And luckily we did. We left Tori at the house because we thought that would be the safest option, all locked up, so that was fine. And we managed to get some food, and then we made our way to the airport. And then the journey just ended up being even more of a nightmare. We got on the flight to Nigeria, landed in Nigeria at 9 p.m. the next day, and then we got into the immigration office, and we sat there for about an hour and a half waiting for them just to print off a little sticker saying yes, you can go through, even though we'd already done our visas. And there was no aircon in there. It was 40 degrees. The guards in there are trying to bribe us for money, saying, "Oh, we can get this done quick if you give us some money," even though you can't do that there. And then we ended up being taken to the hotel about 11:30 at night. We get to the hotel. Bear in mind, we're playing the next day, or Perry is. We're playing the next day, and what was I going to say?
You're playing the next day. You got back to the hotel.
Yeah, that's it. We got to the hotel, and me and Perry had a room shared, and Tori was going to share with someone else, but they only had one room left, even though all the rooms were actually booked for the players. So then Tori had nowhere to sleep that night. So she ended up just sharing with a French girl in another room that had a really small bed, and she ended up having to stay there for the week with her. This is all at midnight, and Perry played the next day at 1 p.m. And we've been travelling for almost 2 days, had a nightmare of a journey, and Perry just about managed to get through his first match 3-2.
Was that the one against Henrik Mustonen?
Yeah,
who's a legend, by the way, Henrik. I don't know if Henrik's listening, but yeah. Henrik is a legend.
Yeah, he's a really super nice guy. Perry had a big battle with him on the back courts. The back courts in Nigeria, for those of you who don't know, probably the toughest conditions a squash player could play on if you've never gone outside of your home club. Mm-hmm. Imagine playing on a 40-degree squash court, no aircon whatsoever, no aircon. They left it on, I would say, deliberately for the players not from Nigeria to just overheat on court. The ball was bouncing about this high, this low off from the top of the back glass. Imagine the back glass is there and you'd hit a drive and it bounced half the back wall, not somewhere down there.
Yeah.
So the rallies were just going for ages, and the air was so thick that you couldn't even swallow and breathe properly.
Well, I can imagine someone like Henrik, who's from Finland, Well, he is Finnish, right?
Yeah, Finnish.
He's not going to enjoy the hot climate either, is he? If he's used
No.
to cold court. Well, I don't know how cold the courts are or where he actually trains. But
Yeah, he trains in Finland, but Perry went 2 down, and I had to explain to Perry that, look, you're fitter than this guy. You just have to like push through mentally, and he managed to find a way to win 3-2.
yeah.
I was luckily on the glass court. It was still very, very hot, but it wasn't so enclosed, so I managed to get through, and in the end, we did pretty well in the tournament, and I came through and won, and Perry got to the semis, and Torrey won the women's. So
Yeah, because I remember you saying to me at the time, if you don't win this tournament, well, you're going to be so annoyed because it was such a difficult whole situation, the whole thing.
to just get there.
Yeah, exactly. Like,
And I put a lot of pressure on ourselves. Like the visas were so expensive. The flights were okay, but the visas like £200 each.
Yeah.
And you add up all that stuff. Like the least you want to go do for me to get up, the move up the rankings, I had to kind of win it. So there's a lot of pressure going in there with all the travel stuff on top of that.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, no, but yeah, luckily you did win.
Yeah.
No, would you do it again?
That's actually a really tough question. If I knew what I was going into,
Yeah.
yes, because I would have a preconceived idea of what would happen. If it was an unknown, probably no.
Okay.
Because it was such a horrible. It was honestly in Istanbul. I was like, I wanted to go home.
Yeah.
Horrible.
Yeah, so that's not great. Now, you did tell me another story about you having to go and deliver pizzas or something along those lines. Tell us this story in Germany.
Well, this is quite a recent one. I was just finishing up playing TOC in January. I'd gotten really, really ill after Florida, and I tried to play TOC and it didn't work out too well. And then I said to my German league manager that I wanted to go home, but he'd already paid for the flight, so I had to go over and play in German league. And I was meant to get there on the Saturday, and my flight in New York got cancelled, so I didn't arrive until the Saturday afternoon, so I missed the first match. And then I played on the Sunday, and then in the Sunday evening, me and Perry's flight then got cancelled again because of some sort of storm in England, so the flights weren't being allowed to land in England, so we had to stay an extra night in Germany. And British Airways gave us a hotel to stay in, and then they gave us some food vouchers. So we decided to use some food vouchers and try and pay for some food because we hadn't eaten all day. And we ordered some pizza and a sort of curry thing. And the guy came in, he didn't speak a word of English, he's some sort of Polish guy. And I asked for a receipt because we needed a receipt to claim back our expenses to British Airways. And then I said that the guy didn't say a word and said, "Oh, we don't have a receipt, it's only cash." So I was like, "Oh yeah, I can give you cash, but I need a receipt." So he was trying to write something down, but I was like, "That's not a proper receipt." So he called up his manager, and the manager said to bring the guys in. So the guy said to me, "Oh, come with me, and you stay here." So he told Perry to stay there, and then I went with him. He got in his car, drove away like a getaway driver in some dodgy Peugeot, driving through almost some red lights in Germany. It literally felt like I was being kidnapped. And we ended up driving in the middle of nowhere through to this place, and it was a restaurant. Luckily, the restaurant owner gave me a proper printed receipt, and then I got back in the car, and he started driving away again. But we had to stop off at 2 delivery spots. I thought he was just taking me back to my hotel to eat our food. It was in the back of the car. I'm sat in the middle of nowhere in a car. He's out delivering pizzas. I'm just sat in the car. And Perry's at the hotel having a whale of a time, all relaxed and enjoying himself. And I'm just sat there. And then in the end, he drove me back to the hotel, and it was about 20, 30 minutes later. The food was all cold, but yeah, that was quite an experience. That was just to eat.
So how do you make sure that you can still perform well in your matches when there are so many things going on off court when you are travelling?
Yeah, like that's a good question. It's a tough thing to get right. You just got to be as organised as possible. Like when I go away, I do pack quite a lot of food with me in my suitcase, or I really check what time I'm playing. I make sure I get my practice course booked in advance well. I like to make sure my flights are booked in advance early. I know who I'm staying with in advance, or the hotel, so that when I get there, everything's set up in the way so I can perform with the best possible I can. Otherwise, it does get a bit stressful, and it is as stressful as it is because you've got to get to and from the club by yourself. It might be taking Ubers, you might be walking, taxis, whatever, or like public transport. So the more you can get on top of that stuff and be organised early, the better. And what I'm realising now is that I've competed on the tour for a couple of years, 3 or 4 years now. And when you go back to the same tournament, you can kind of plan ahead. You know what to expect. Yeah. It's not like a whole new experience. So like if I was to go to Nigeria again, okay, I know I know what to expect. Or I've got Chicago coming up next week. I know what to expect. I'm staying in the same house, the same club. So yes. I'm looking forward to being there.
And when there's a language barrier, what about that? Like if you can't find where you're going and they don't speak English, how do you get around that?
Yeah, that brings me up. That's just triggering another memory. It's actually really tough, like the language barrier. I was in Argentina once when I was 19. I was doing 4 back-to-back events, and I got this bus from one of the tournaments to Buenos Aires Airport. It was like a 5-hour bus. I thought it was taking me straight to Buenos Aires Airport, but it didn't. It took me into the city. So then it dropped. The guy said it's the final destination. I couldn't understand him. He said, "Oh, you have to get off here. It terminates here." Yeah. So I'm in the middle of Buenos Aires. No one's speaking English. I speak a little bit of Spanish, back then not much. And I'm walking around. It's like 28 degrees. I'm sweating with my jumper. I've got my back rucksack. I've got my big 23 kg bag on me. I'm walking around, going in between every single little shop, and asking someone to connect to Wi-Fi because I'm in the middle of nowhere. I need to get to the airport because I'm meeting someone, so they take me on somewhere else. Mm-hmm. After about half an hour of walking to each shop, I managed to find someone, and they let me connect to their phone, and then I could contact the guy who then booked me the ticket for the next bus to get from the city to the airport. Mm-hmm. And then I finally made it there. But it was a proper nerve-wracking journey because like you're in the middle of nowhere, no one's speaking the language, mm-hmm. and you've got to try and find your way around by yourself, carrying some big heavy ass bags around.
How much Spanish do you speak?
Now I can understand probably like 70% of it.
Oh really?
But I can't. I can speak a little bit, but I can understand most of it.
So when did you learn that, or how did you learn that?
I did quite a bit during lockdown.
Oh really?
And because we go on holiday to Spain quite a bit,
of course,
so
yeah.
Over the years we've developed a bit of the language and.
See, now I wish that I knew it because with paddle. Obviously, Spain is a big paddle country, so it would be good for me to be able to understand that.
Yeah.
Especially since a lot of the coaches
Spanish speaking.
Yeah, on YouTube and stuff like that are Spanish speaking, and or if you're watching the World Paddle Tour matches, the commentary or probably the more detailed commentary will be in Spanish with the people.
And I guess they're saying certain sayings that. Correlate to what they're talking
about. Or you can even hear what the coaches are saying to the players in between games and sets. And I bet they're going into some great detail, and it would be very interesting to kind of see what they're saying. Exactly. Yeah. So I'm a bit jealous that you can.
Well, in lockdown, it's just good to learn different languages, but it's hard. It takes a lot of time, so I just did a bit during lockdown. So you
should. Michael Andrews, he's into his languages a lot.
Is he?
If you're listening, Michael. Yeah, I know he's very into his languages and going into that sort of thing.
That's good.
In life, but so good on you, Michael.
Yeah.
But let's move on to a story you haven't actually told me, but you said to bring it up, and that is when you were in China, when you were going to Singapore, but you stopped off in China.
Yeah. So this was recently, this is another one of those things where you're doing a lot of travelling. People don't realise how much the travelling takes it out of you and how far you've got to go to get to some places. So when I played Singapore, I booked a flight with Air China. I had to fly from I think it was Gatwick to Shanghai, which is in China as a stopover. So I had 3 hours in China, and then it was China on to Singapore. But when I landed in China, I tried to connect to Wi-Fi, but the Wi-Fi, you could connect, but nothing would work. You would get no internet. You couldn't go on Google. You couldn't go on any social media. It's all blocked. Everything's blocked out there. The only thing you could use was WhatsApp messaging. Mm-hmm. But even that was so slow. You could probably send a message every 5 minutes and it would come through. And I'm trying to contact my family or friends and stuff. And because you've been on a 12-hour flight from London to China. So you're trying to let everyone know how you're getting on. So nothing's working. And as we landed, we all stood in this queue to get through to the security part. But because there's 120 passengers going from that bit to the next bit, and instead of letting each passenger through one by one, they had to check off every single passenger. So we all stood there for an hour and 10 minutes waiting when we could have just gone through one by one quickly and wait to the next flight. But that didn't happen. So we all spent an hour and 20 minutes just waiting to go through, and some people nearly missed their next connecting flight. and then it was another 7-hour flight on from there, China to Singapore. And like, you could travel halfway across the world like that. You've travelled 20 odd hours, and you could potentially lose in the first round. So it's a tough lifestyle, and you've got to be prepared to compete and prepare for your best. Otherwise, you go all the way there just to lose. It's quite disheartening.
Now, you actually managed to win your first round in Singapore, didn't you?
Yeah, in that tournament I did. Yeah,
so made it worth it in the end.
Yeah, it was, in the end it was worth it. But it's just there's a lot that goes on that people don't account for.
Yeah, exactly. And I like. The interesting part for me is there are a lot of players who never made it just because they're not very good at travelling.
Yeah.
You know, like there are so many like local talented players who are unbelievable, and in league matches they'll beat a lot of good pros and they'll be consistent, and you're wondering how on earth did this guy not make it to the top rank, to the top of the rankings? But in reality, they'd travel to a tournament and they wouldn't be able to perform that well because they found it really difficult to, I don't know, be focused when they're travelling.
Some people get homesick.
Exactly.
Some people don't like the actual travelling. Some people don't like being in a foreign place where they don't know or have everything normally have at home.
Yeah.
You've got to factor all these little things in, and that's not even before you step on the squash court.
Yeah. So, like, next time you're watching the pros play, now obviously we haven't finished, but like next time you watch the pros play, have maybe a bit more respect. I know you all respect them anyway, but have even more respect. It's not just that they're really good at squash, it's that they're really good at squash and they're doing it under a lot of pressure of the travelling, of the training and everything that comes with it. It's even harder to perform with all those things going on.
Yeah.
Maybe some people find it easier because it kind of prepares them.
It also depends on what type of person you are. Like if you're a very laid back person, I'm quite laid back, but I'm also quite organised, so I've got quite a good balance. But some of the very laid back people on tour, like, it doesn't even matter. They just go. They love it. They just love being away and travelling and stuff and being on the road. Whereas some people really struggle with that, and they like to be very organised with what they're doing.
Yeah, I think that's my problem. I would be too. I'd just get really stressed about it all.
Yeah.
I'd really struggle with the travelling side of it. But yeah, now, obviously, there was one of the times would have been the first time that you had to travel by yourself to another country. Can you talk to us about that first time when you must have been about 19? Or?
It was 18.
18.
When I was 18, I went to Estonia for like a satellite. I'd only ever done satellites in like England or like around like Britain or something. I decided to go to Estonia for a satellite and try and get some points and build my way up. And just like that first time experience travelling by yourself, like for any upcoming juniors that want to make that transition to a professional, like you've got to put yourself out there and experience these things, because like going to Estonia, as soon as you get off the flight, like you've got to find your way to the club, and if you're not very well versed in doing that, or never done that before, or you've done it with your family but not by yourself, these things you learn on the fly when you're doing it. So I think it's just putting yourself out there and like just finding your way around and making friends and making relationships with people and be as prepared as you can before you go. That was something that I learned pretty quickly. Otherwise, it is a tough time.
Mm-hmm. Yeah. And I remember travelling with you when we were young, with your family, to be fair. It's not quite the same, and it was only to Exeter, which at the time...
Silver, wasn't it?
Solid 4.5 hour drive, or 5 hours.
That was like a long trip back then.
That was a long trip for me. That was a big deal. I obviously going with a different family.
Yeah.
But there's a funny story from that. Do you want to tell what happened in the caravan?
Well, I think there's two versions. My version and your version.
What's your version of this story?
Well, my dad booked us a caravan for the week. I think it was me, you, Perry, and Torrey. I think Bain Heston was still a bit young, or did they come?
No, I think they were all there. I think everyone was there.
Okay, everyone was there.
Big caravan.
It was like a big caravan. So me and Josh were in the 2-berth one. There's like 2 single beds in there, and Josh was like leaning over to get his bottle or something. It was like, I'm not sure how late it was. It might have been quite late. He was leaning over to get his bottle. I was like, Josh, can you shut up? So I started like. I think I tickled him, and then he fell off the bed and onto the floor, and fell in the gap, and I could hardly get out of the gap because the gaps in the bed were so small. But I just felt it was the perfect opportunity when he was reaching over just to get him.
Let me say exactly what happened. Curtis thought it would be a good idea to steal my water bottle.
Oh.
Now, Anyone that knows me knows that I keep my water bottle with me at all times. Maybe it stemmed from this. Maybe this was the moment. I was like, it can't be taken away from me again. Anyway, Curtis stole it from me on his bed. So then I went over to get it over the gap between the beds. And then Curtis tickled me when I was halfway over and I fell onto the floor, thump. And then, obviously, Curtis' dad wasn't too happy. Came in, got annoyed at us both.
Oh, yeah. He was like shouting at us because he had like a semi the next day or something at me.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Oh.
So it was just us mucking around when we were younger on the tour.
Yeah, I mean, for me, that would have been one of the first... Well, that would have been the first time I actually went to a tournament without my dad.
Yeah.
Or so I'd have been, 11, 12?
Yeah, 12 something.
12, I was probably 12.
Yeah, 12 or 13. It might have been 13s or 15s.
Nah, it was under 13s, I'm
Yeah.
pretty sure. But yeah, so that was an exciting time. But speaking of staying with other people, now obviously sometimes you travel with Perry, Tori, like you said, in Nigeria. But with the big tournaments, you can't all rely on being at them because, they're harder to get into.
Yeah.
Now, obviously, for the biggest ones, PSA pay for the hotel while you're in the tournament? Is that
mostly, yeah.
And it's, what is that, like 2 days? You get the hotel until 2 days after you've knocked out of the tournament.
Yeah. So on the most on the big tournaments, like the platinum events, PSA will provide a hotel for the players for the night before your first round, and then 2 nights after you lose. But you say I may get to like America 3 days before the start of the tournament because you need to acclimatise in terms of time zone differences and travel and stuff. So you wouldn't get the hotel for the 2 nights before that, so you'd have to pay for that or find somewhere else to stay, and then you get the hotel bonus.
Mm-hmm.
And if you plan to stay for a bit longer than when you lose, or you plan to stay until the end of the tournament and you lose before that, you either have to pay for the hotel, which can be expensive because we normally get put up in like good hotels, or you'd have to go and find somewhere else which is a bit cheaper.
And when it comes to booking flights back, obviously you don't know when you're going to lose.
Yeah.
And it's like the difficulty between, do I assume I'm going to lose in this round, so I'm going to book a flight for the day after that? Mm-hmm. Or do you not want that in your head and want to try and win everything and then book a flight later on, but then it's hard to get the right one and you're paying extra to stay for longer? Because I remember Ollie Pett talking about times where he thought he might lose a match, booked a flight, actually won the match, then had to cancel the flight and pay to get a new one, and it was all a nightmare. Like, how do you deal with that?
I've actually been dealing with that quite well. I tend to be quite good with my booking arrangements. I tend to book quite near the end of a tournament because, especially for the small ones when I was going up, I like to think I could get through a few rounds and stuff. And even if I didn't make it all the way to the final, I used to like staying and watching the semis and finals and like study the players, watch, even, and then you can get practice hits in with other players at the tournament. So like even in Chicago next week, I've booked for a whole week, not just like 4 days.
Yeah.
Because that means I can stay there no matter how well I do. I can watch the players, play other people, and you can still improve when you're out there. And I've also got someone that I can stay with, so they don't mind me staying for the week. And it makes it a bit more flexible.
So just another question, because you talk about staying to watch the rest of the tournament. Are you the sort of person that wants the person that beat you to win the tournament, or the person that beat you to lose in the next match? Because there are 2 ways of looking at it.
That's a good question.
Because if the person that beats you wins the tournament, it makes you look better, because it's like, I lost to the winner, or makes you feel a little bit better. Whereas on the flip side, you might think, oh, they beat me and they shouldn't have beaten me, so they don't deserve to win it. Like, is there a...
I'm probably more the first person then. I'm probably more the person that if they beat me, then I don't mind them going on to win it.
Yeah, although I had a number of times in the British Junior Open for me, the person that beat me usually got to the final. Yeah. And that was always really annoying, because it was like...
It's a tough draw.
Every year, it's like the person I lose to in the second or third round ends up winning it or getting to the final or something like that. Yeah. That always wound me up a little bit. But at the same time, it made me feel a bit better. Yeah. Because I didn't lose to someone. Exactly. Yeah. So it's a bit of both. Now, obviously, we've just mentioned about staying in hotels, but particularly in Canada and America, you get billeting situations, or you stay with families of members of the clubs or whatever. Can you talk to us a bit about that, about what it's like to stay at families' houses, the goods, the parts and the bad parts?
For me, being able to stay with so at some tournaments you get a choice of whether the host will put up a tournament. You either book your own You either book your own hotel or you can stay with a billet. And I always prefer to stay with billets, especially in Canada and America. The members of the clubs are very like homely, and they've got like a good close knit community. So billeting's my favourite option, because staying in a hotel can be boring by yourself. You just go between club and hotel, but with the billet you can actually speak to people, make relationships, make friends. Like in the last 3 or 4 years, I've made some really good friends and relationships with people.
Yeah, and it means you can go back next year, right? And
Yeah.
stay with the same people.
Yeah.
That's great. Yeah.
And if they ever come to England, we can meet up and we stay in contact. So that's like my preferred option, and I'll be doing that in my next couple of events. And like, for example, when I played in the Toronto one last year, I was sharing with Charlie Lee in the same billet, which was quite fun because you can share another player, and then you get to know the billets. And then we decided to share each other because I think we're in the opposite side of the draw, so we probably wouldn't meet unless we got to the final. It's a very strong 12k event. There was a number of people who could have won it. And me and Charlie actually both ended up getting to the final of that event, which was quite funny because we'd been sharing all week, we help each other, and then all of a sudden you're playing each other, and you wake up in the morning and then the vibe kind of changes and you've got to compete against each other, and you're not like friends anymore until you finish the match. So like, these little things can happen. It's quite funny. It's a different scenario. I guess other sports wouldn't have that. Like if you were a tennis player, you'd just be staying with your team, or your football team would just be your team. Whereas in squash, like, you could end up staying with one of your opponents later on in the event, which is, I guess, a really different thing to be happening.
When you were staying with Charlie and you had to play in the final, did you think, oh, maybe I'll slip something in his tea?
Yeah, I tried to get something in his oats. But he wouldn't.
Was he covering it? He was like,
he wouldn't let his eyes off it.
You're not spiking that.
Yeah, couldn't get anything in there.
Some laxatives or something.
So yeah.
Now, what about the bad times with billeting? Like, have there been any experiences where it's been very difficult?
I've only had probably one bad experience with billets. Normally they've been really good. There's one when I was in Belarus. I was like 19. I paid like a 5 or 6k, and I'd done really well. I got to the semis unseeded, beat a few high ranked players, and it was I was sleeping, and it was the semi final the day after. I was meant to play Christian Frost, and I got to bed around 11 p.m. nice and early, like try and get a good night's sleep. And then the wife who was at the house, she had a husband at the house, and he was in the next room, playing some like computer game, and every 5 seconds he would just start like bursting out laughing. It was so loud to the point where I just couldn't get to sleep. So it was like 11 p.m. and all of a sudden I looked at my watch, it was like 1:30. I looked at my watch, it was 2:30, and he was still doing it. Like, it got to the point where I had to cover my head with my pillow. All I wanted to do was get to sleep, and this guy was just like gaming all night, mucking around with his friends, talking and giggling.
You should ask to join him. You're not going to sleep anyway.
Well, yeah, but he didn't speak a word of English. He was Belarusian, so like,
oh yeah,
there was nothing I could do. And then the next morning I had to get up and play. But just some of those little experiences can really put you off, and you just got to learn how to deal with those.
But what about some times where you have had to stay in a hotel with other players? Because I know that frequently players are put together in a room, obviously to save money, but obviously you'll end up staying with some pretty big names, and I know one time you had to stay with, well, I say had to, you got the privilege of staying with Mohamed El Shabaghi himself. What's it like? Because you've gone from looking up to players like this, obviously Mohamed El Shabaghi, he's one of the biggest legends of the sport that there are, with his achievements and all that, and suddenly you're sharing a room with him.
Yeah.
What's that like?
To be honest, it was pretty surreal. When I got the call up to play for England, and then when I got there, I got told I was sharing with Shabaghi. Like, I just couldn't believe it, because I've grown up my whole life watching Shabaghi play at the top of the level, top of the game against all these legends, and then I'm coming up through the junior ranks wanting to be a pro, and all of a sudden, like 4 or 5 years later, you're sharing a room with him. It was pretty unreal, and it was just like such a good experience to get inside the mind of someone of that level and hear stories and have advice, talk to certain things about, and really get to know him. It was a really nice experience.
Mm-hmm. And when you talked to him, did you say to him that I'm sorry, mate, but I always wanted Rami to win?
I didn't say that.
I didn't say that. No.
I didn't say that. I didn't always think that, but I didn't say that. No.
We love them both. Those two matches, if anyone doesn't know, the ones I'm referring to. 2014 World Championship final, where Rami had just come back from injury and Rami won 3-2. And
the
it was
2012 one.
It was like 14-12 in the there was the 2012 one in Qatar.
Yeah,
they were both in Qatar.
Both in Qatar. Yeah, two of the greatest.
Both of them
matches.
3-2, some unbelievable rallies. But particularly the one when Rami came back from injury in 2014.
Yeah.
It was unbelievable because I think Rami went 10-5 up in the fifth.
Yeah, Shibagi
brought it back to 10-all, had a match point. And Rami won 14-12 in the fifth with a drop off the return of serve or something like that. Unbelievably, runs up the front wall. He's doing acrobatics, incredible. And then 2015, just when you think that there couldn't be a match better than that, at a higher pace, higher quality, El Guna 2015 final. Rami somehow the pace is the fastest pace. Watch these matches on YouTube, but. Unbelievable pace. They almost volley everything.
Yeah. No back wall game type thing.
Ridiculous. And anyway, they go full 5 games again, and Rami actually comes back from 10-5, 10-6 down.
Yeah.
I remember he gets back to 10-all with a straight kill where he just thumps it from the back of the service box. Perfect shot. And then wins it in the tie break. And those matches are some of the best ever, just so you know what I'm referring to there.
And the thing is, as a kid, for me, growing up watching those matches... And then seeing yourself 8-9 years later sharing a room with one of them, that's the most surreal thing to happen. It's because it's almost like a dream come true. You haven't made it, but what you've done is you've got yourself into a position where you can create memories with top legends like that in the sport.
See, I managed to create a little memory without having to go through the pain that you've gone through. And actually, we're going to bring Henrik Mustonen back into this story.
Yeah, good old Henrik.
Yeah, good old Henrik. I remember at St George's Hill, Rami was there doing an advert for a company on the glass court there. Anyway, Henrik was down there and he had a PSL match later that day, and I was training there that day too when I was young. So I asked Henrik if he wanted a game. Now, I knew Henrik a little bit because...
He was top 40 back then as well, wasn't
he? Yeah, he was a good player.
I
I'd met him in Hong Kong when I was living there. He came to my club, Hong Kong Football Club, and I got him a drink there because you had to have a card to buy drinks there at the time. I don't know if it's still the case. But he didn't have a card and I did because I was a member there, so I got him a drink. So he kind of knew me from there.
Yeah.
So anyway, we had a little game and we had a close game. Obviously, he wasn't going to be trying flat out, but... he had a match later. I think I won.
But the fact he stepped on court with you and gave
but
him his time.
I won it 12-10. But anyway, back to Rami. Rami was actually watching this game between me and Henrik.
Oh, was he?
Now, obviously, I was trying to show off a bit because you've got when Rami, the best player ever,
one of the best guys, is watching you,
and he's watching by himself. No one else is there. Just Rami sitting there watching your match, clapping your shots. Because I did a few little nasty flicks and stuff like that. I was trying to do some fun shots. Because Rami was watching you there.
Trying to replicate what he does.
Yeah, exactly. You're trying to do things that might make Rami think, oh, this guy, he's got skills.
Yeah.
And to see Rami clapping some of your shots, that's when I was like, that's special.
Well, it's a real special moment that you can cherish and the ones that you look back on, isn't it?
Yeah, exactly. And I played pretty well to push Henrik, even if he wasn't going flat out.
Yeah.
For someone at the time, I must have been about 15. So, it's definitely a good moment. Now, obviously, you haven't just stayed with Shibagi. You've stayed with a lot of players around the 50 in the world and above. I know you've stayed with Kandra. But recently, you had the flu.
Yeah.
But not only did you have the flu, you had the flu while sharing a room with someone.
Yeah.
Poor person. And this person was Faraz Khan.
Yeah. Legend, Faraz. You're a legend.
Now, Curtis, Faraz, if you are watching, I don't know why you'd watch this rubbish, but if you are watching, it'd be great if you are. Curtis has been singing your praises and saying how nice you were to him, despite the fact that you had the flu and was, well, obviously going to be contagious at this point, yet you were having to share a room with him. But you were very, let's use the word loving here.
Yeah.
Let's not make it weird, but he was very loving in the way that he...
Yeah, this was very recently, actually. After I played Florida in January, played Tamimi, had a few good days of training, and then I got seriously ill 3 days after, and I was in bed for 5 days straight. with some probably the worst illness I've ever had, and the worst flu symptoms I've ever had. And there was one morning where I was just shivering constantly for 2.5 hours straight. I had the 2 blankets on me were not enough, even though it was 28 degrees outside in Florida. You're meant to be sitting outside enjoying the sun. I'm laying there shivering, can't actually move. And I had to call Faraz and say, Faraz, do you mind getting me an extra blanket and putting it on me because I cannot move. I'm freezing. And luckily he did, which is a super nice guy. He was, he looked after me, helped me out, and made sure I got back on the mend. So people sharing with different people like that, you get to build good relationships and meet great people. So just people like that just make it a pleasure to travel and tour with, really.
And I guess the good thing about, obviously, it is somewhat inconvenient having to share with someone.
Yeah.
Like if you had a choice, you'd probably be by yourself.
Yeah, because some events like Qatar will give you a room by yourself, and you get that freedom and space for yourself. But other tournaments don't have that luxury.
Yeah, but what it does do is it actually forces players to interact, and it in some ways cultivates friendships and stuff like that. You wouldn't, I know if I was there, anyone that knows me, I struggle to talk to people that I don't know.
Yeah.
So I'd be there and I'd be kind of in my own corner. Not that I don't want to talk to people, just because I'd probably be too scared to. And I wouldn't actually end up integrating into, I didn't in the junior scene, but I'd struggle to integrate into the kind of groups that people naturally make who are a bit more extroverted. But by staying with people, you're forced into that position.
You're forced into building relationships.
And then that's, in a way, that's a good thing, because then you become friends, and then it's easier to integrate, and it's easier to feel more comfortable.
And when you're at those big events and you don't know anyone, that's the way you get to know people.
Yeah.
And
because I always found the junior circuit very hostile, and even the lower ranked professional circuit.
Yeah.
It felt... No, actually, to be fair, the lower ranked professional didn't feel that hostile.
It's different to the junior scene.
But I always felt like the top end junior, when you're like a top few ranked player, it feels very hostile. I felt like I couldn't be friends with a lot of them. I was friends with you, but other than that, I felt that it was difficult. Whereas if you are forced into staying with these people, then you naturally become friends or enemies. They can work the other way if you just hate each other.
And on the PSA, it gets to a point where if the tournament organisers give you the option to choose to share with people, then you can stay with preferred people, which is a nice alternative to have.
The only experience I ever had staying with people, other than your family, was actually sharing a room with you and Ollie Pett for the men's inter-counties.
Good memories, that were.
I do remember Ollie was up all night on his laptop. He was living in America at the time, so he was completely out of whack.
Time zone,
But I do remember that quite well, that was good fun. But I think we've covered most of the recent times.
Yeah, I mean, I've only been on tour for probably 3 or 4 years max. So that's just a few stories already just from what I've done. I've probably got another 10, 15 years in the game. So I'm sure there'll be a lot more stories to come and a lot more unknowns.
Yeah, I was just going to say, it's just the start of the journey.
Yeah.
Which means we've got plenty more content coming from this man. And if there are any other pros watching this and want to come on the podcast, either to talk about stories and adventures you've been on in the squash scene, or to actually have an in-depth squash discussion about your career or general concepts or ideas about squash that you want to talk about, I'd be very happy to do that, and it would be great fun. So thank you guys for watching, and please subscribe to the channel for more content like this. And also have a look at the Team Malik YouTube channel that Curtis works hard on. And does the videos for, despite having to train full time as well.
Yeah,
it's not easy. I can assure you, making a video is not as easy as it looks. But with a bit of effort, it's worth it. So thank you for watching, and see you next time.
See you guys.